Hello everyone, I am back with another Recreating Excel challenge, and this time around I'm taking on this static dashboard showing the avocado price and volume, historical performance of avocado year on year for 2 years across 8 regions in the United States. And I guess what attracts me to this, I think, is the greens and the yellows and the fact that everything is really cleanly laid out, just beautiful black lines everywhere, and the font style is also really nice. But it's a static dashboard. I think it's going to be, I'm not very fond of static dashboards, but we'll still take it on nonetheless. So getting started. The first thing I'm doing is I have my notepad file open and I'm just really picking apart the dashboard before I step into Excel. I want to list out the different components that make up this dashboard, and of course listing them out so that we can then take them, all these elements up, and go and recreate them in Excel. So the first set of elements I'm listing out are the data elements. And if we're thinking in terms of measures and dimensions, the measures we see here are the avocado volume and the avocado price. I'm going to go ahead and update the notepad with avocado price. In terms of dimensions, we have dimension of region. So we have 9 regions represented here, where South Central, California, Southeast, Northeast, Great Lakes, Mid-South, and the total US. And in terms of time, we have this data represented month on month across 2 years, from January 2016 to December 2017. So those are the data elements that we have, and I'm just going ahead to spell out the monthly average. I think I'm going to need that in determining the range for my raw data. I'll still come back to this later anyway. And then the next thing we go ahead to do, so the monthly average for the volume is 10,000, about 10,000. Monthly average for price, I'm looking at the data, the year-on-year average presented, and that looks like about 1.2. So I list that out, but I still go on ahead to use range instead of average. And then for time, I like to make my dashboards as close to time as possible. So I'm updating that for 2019 to 2024, the table I'm going to create. I'm moving on to the visual elements, beyond the data elements, now the visual elements. And the first thing we see, if you step back at this and squint at this dashboard, it looks like a series of panels, 9 panels. And for each panel, you see a region label, you see the bar charts with the target line, you see averages for each year and the percentage change, and then you see a line chart. And of course, this is represented across the 9 panels that we can see over here. And the last major element we see here is the header. Now I'm done. Over to the dashboard. The first thing I do is to step into the dashboard and hide the grid lines. Then I have I've typed out the heading, which is historical avocado price of volume. And now what I'm doing is trying to create the visual layer, the layer that is going to be made up of series of panels. In the original dashboard, there were 9 panels, but that's because it had a portrait layout. But Excel has a landscape layout, so I'm going to do 8 panels with across 2 rows having 4 panels each. And now what I'm doing is just sizing our boxes, because I want to get a sense of where all the elements and how the boxes will be aligned to one another. And we need them to be perfectly aligned, perfectly distributed. So this is a really iterative process. You see me selecting the boxes and deleting them all over again and again until I get that perfect landing, and I get the 8 panels perfectly sized and perfectly distributed across to take up as much space as possible in this Excel layout. So I took a picture of the original dashboard, and I have that on the Excel view so that I can remind myself of where each element is supposed to go. And now what I'm doing is creating placeholders for the different elements. I've created the big rectangle for the line charts, representing where the line charts will go, and a smaller rectangle representing where the bar charts with the target line will go. I'm also creating text box placeholders for the region header, and I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that and create the average price text box placeholder. And of course, we have that small we have the label for that in a smaller font, and I'm creating the placeholders for those, and I just selected those, grouped them, and I'm duplicated them in 3 places. And what I'm going to do now is select all the boxes and ensure that they are all properly aligned to one another, properly aligned top-wise and properly distributed. And I'm going ahead to just create the header, the definition of the data, which is shown in the smaller font just below it. So once I'm done and I have gotten the right alignment for all the elements on the panel, I select all the elements, I group them, and I duplicate them, and then I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate that across all the 8 panels. I deleted my first duplication because I wanted to set up the border to a light gray color, and it's good to set it up one time and then duplicate it rather than setting it up and then having to go into each one of the 8 panels and change it one by one. So I'm trying to be as efficient as possible with this setup. So just going ahead, and in being efficient, when I got a set of 2, I grouped them, and then I just duplicated those in 4 different places rather than having to create 8 different duplicates, or 7 duplicates, if you will. So now what I'm doing is updating the region headers. Those are static. So I keep for the text placeholders, you notice that I have some in black font and some in red font. The red font are the ones that are going to be dynamic, and the ones in black font are the ones that are static. So I've done that, and now I'm moving over to my raw data. I've created a new sheet for the raw data, and I'm going on ahead to create the raw data with randomized data like I usually do. Just in case I haven't mentioned this before, whenever we're creating a dashboard, there's usually 3 different Excel sheets we're using. There's the visual sheet, the one I just finished creating. There's the raw data sheet, the one I'm currently working on. And then there's usually an intermediate sheet that contains pivot tables or formulas or whatever connects. The essence of that intermediate sheet or that tables sheet is to connect the raw data to the visual data. But back to this view. So what I'm doing here, you can see I'm setting up the columns that I'm going to need, and we are using 5. We need 5 different columns: region, month, year, avocado volume, and avocado price. And we know our regions. We know we're using we know we're using 7 regions. Of course, the 8th region is the cumulative region, so I'm not putting that in the raw data. So I'm typing out all the 8 different regions, and what I'm going to do now is replicate them in 12 places, because we know we need data for each month in the year. And we're working with 2 years, so we've done this one, and then we're going to do this one more time. All of this is just manual workaround for creating raw data that I don't have. But you can see how I'm doing it. I basically dragged it out to 12 points across board. And then I'm typing out the months, and Excel has autofill. So once I just type out January, February, March, and I drag it out, it automatically fills in the other months. For year, I'm doing the same thing as well. And now I've created all the columns for 2019, and now I just duplicated that and changed the year to 2020. So we have the first 3 columns set up. So the first 3 columns for the dimensions are set up, and then for the next 2 columns, which are values, which are going to be numbers, the avocado volume and avocado price. What I'm doing to the edge of the table, the data sheet, is I am setting up the range, and I flipped back to the original dashboard just to establish the range. What is the highest number and what is the lowest number for volume and for price? And because I'm basically doing my manual work there, what the table has is the annual volume. So I have typed out the annual volume, and I'm going to divide it by 12, divide both numbers by 12. So I have done that, and you see that there. And I'm doing the same for the price. I'm selecting the lowest number I can see for monthly price and the highest number, and I'm typing it out into the Excel sheets. And I'm going to use the run between function to generate values in between the highest and the lowest number to populate this data table I have to the left in columns A to E. So it's equals to run between the highest number and the lowest number, and it's going to generate a random number in between those 2 points. And of course, I am locking it and making those figures absolute because I'm going to drag out the formula that I'm typing in row 2. I'm going to drag it out to the entire end of the table. Before I drag it out, I format them to numbers. And now I've dragged it out and it's generated random numbers for me. It did that for the volume, but for the price, you can see it's all showing 1, which was pretty weird. I couldn't figure out what exactly was going on. But when I tried to investigate the formula, and I saw the formulas were connected the way they were supposed to, I kind of just did a manual walk around after fiddling with it for a while, and I stepped into the original price and I multiplied the high and low range by 100, and then it became randomized. And I locked it, I copied and pasted it as values, and I just divided the whole set of data by 100, and it gave me what I was looking for. So now the data tables are set up and they are ready to go. And I'm just going to turn them into an actual Excel table. The data range is set, and now on to the pivot tables, my third Excel sheet. I have created a pivot table out of the data table I just finished creating. And now I am adjusting the pivot table layout so that it aggregates the data. What was on the data table we just created was normalized data, but the pivot table is going to aggregate it so that the information is summarized by month and by region. And I find it hard, and the reason why I'm creating this pivot tables is to generate the bar chart and the line chart. And I find it hard to do that with Excel, with pivot tables. So I have copied and pasted out that table. And I'm using the actual raw range, the regular range, instead of the pivot table. So I've generated the line chart out of the month-on-month trend. And I just realized that the line chart is based on the price and not the volume. So I've gone back to correct that. So I've created an aggregated table out of the price information. And so the first one is set up for California. And what I'm doing is just formatting the chart, removing the extraneous elements, changing the color to black, just the way it is in the original dashboard. And then the original dashboard has data labels for the first and last point, and I'm doing that and just going in to ensure that those labels are in currency format. And I just did a bit of trying to optimize the placement of the data label. And so once I have it set up, what I'm just going to do is duplicate the line chart I have set up for all 8 panels. And after duplicating them, I step into the source data to change the source data to what it's supposed to be. Because when the chart is duplicated, the source data is still pointing to the California row, but I have to go in and for each panel, like now I'm on the mid-south panel, I have to change that range to the mid-south range. And I'm doing that. That's manual work that has to be done by going to the chart design area and going to select data and changing the range. And every time you change the range, the chart format changes. All the formatting work we've done has been lost. So to ensure I don't have to do that all over again, I save the first one, the California one, as a template. And then for each of the charts, once I have changed the data source, I'm just going to change chart type and select that template that I have created so that I am not having to do all the formatting work afresh for each of the 8 line charts. And that's what I'm doing. So what you can see is just reconnecting the chart to the right region data. And then after doing that, I'm going to formats, going to change chart type, going to the templates and selecting that templates I had saved for the California chart. So that's all done. And then what I'm doing is just optimizing the placement of the labels because some of them are summarized. So the charts are all set up. Now to the placeholders, and I go to the intermediate table sheet to calculate that. And the averages are essentially the average of the year's data, and I'm formatting that so that it's just 2 decimal points the way it shows up on the original dashboard. And I'm calculating the percentage change as well, which is essentially 2020 data divided by 2019 minus 1, and I'm dragging that out. And that's set up as percentage, and I think I'm going to format that so that it shows us 2 decimal points. And now to the, I guess, if I might say, the hardest part of this work, which is to reconnect each of the average price information in the intermediate sheet to the visual layer. And we have 3 points across 8 regions. So we're doing this manual work 24 times, essentially selecting the text placeholder, going to the formula bar, typing equals to, and referencing the cell that contains the information that corresponds to that text placeholder. So you can see this is real hard labor, but this is the hardest part of the templates, hardest part of working with this template. Once it's set up one time, it's dynamic and it updates anytime the information at the back end updates. And now what I'm doing is just optimizing the text placeholder because as I connected it, it changed the format. So I'm changing the format back to Calibri size 14, I believe, for all of them. And now what I'm doing is selecting the placeholders at the bottom and just changing their font color to gray so that they are not as prominent as the actual data. It's just a stylistic effect. And I'm just adding that little subheader at the beginning that shows the year-on-year increase, and just telling the user that every time you see green, it refers to an increase, year-on-year increase, and when you see yellow, it refers to a year-on-year decrease. So now the text placeholders are set up. The text placeholders with the average price range and percentage change are set up. And I'm going ahead to create the data for the bar charts. And the data in the bar charts is essentially the cumulative for the first year and the cumulative for the second year, and laying them out so that 2020 is the bar chart and the previous year, 2019, is like a line chart crossing it as target. So as you can see, I fiddled around, but I couldn't quite get that same stylistic effect. So I went for another one that shows the previous year as also as a bar chart, but just slightly below, under the second year, which is 2020. And I have set that up. I've moved that to the front layer, and I'm just adjusting the charts, removing the extraneous elements, adding the labels, and then going ahead to set up the labels so that they look like what's in the original dashboard. And once I'm good with the style, just since I'm going to duplicate this chart across board, and every time I change the source, it's going to lose its formatting, what I do is also to save this chart as a template, so that then whenever I reconnect it to a different source and it loses its formatting, I can go back, change the chart type using that template, and I get all that format, and I get my original format back so that my hard work doesn't go to waste. And now I'm going ahead to replicate that chart that's original in California. I'm replicating it for the Mid-South, South Central. And then with each replication, I'm going back to change the source data for the chart by going to chart design, select data and changing the source range to the row of the region in focus. I'm just going to do that for the rest of the 7 panels. And of course, speed up the video. And as I put the bar charts in place, I remove the rectangle placeholders at the back. And now what I'm doing is just going back in to change the chart type and change it back to that template, the original template setup. So now the charts are set up. Recall the original chart has the year-on-year decrease shown as yellow, the year-on-year increase shown as green. All of them are green now, so I'm going to step into the particular regions where there was a year-on-year decrease and change the charts to yellow. I'm doing this manually because this is a static dashboard. If it was like a dynamic dashboard, it could have been set up to such a way that every time the data changes, the color of the charts would change to reflect whether it's a decrease or an increase we're looking at. And that's it. It's all done. The dashboard is completed. So this is the final look. What do you think? Tell me, do you like this or do you prefer the original? Let me know in the comment section. Thanks for watching. Like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to see more of these videos. Thanks and bye.